Hey everyone, it's Jamison Cable of the Land Between the Meadows, Kentucky History Podcast. I just want to say thank you for your support and listening to this episode. For all the updates on our podcast and YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kentucky History Channel, like and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at KY History Pod. If you're enjoying the podcast, give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform that you're listening to. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, an easy and simple way is to share it on Facebook or any other social media and tell your friends. You can also go to audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod and get a free book of your choice. And finally, you can visit patreon.com/KYHistoryPod if you want extra content from us. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. It means so much to us. All the links I've mentioned are in the description of the podcast, so go check them out. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, if it's not about Kentucky, it ain't worth a hill of beans. Welcome back, everybody, to the Land Between the Meadows, Kentucky History Podcast. I'm here in Crab Orchard with Mr. Pope, and it's a beautiful day in Kentucky.
Metropolis of Crab Orchard. We're in the shadows of the high rises.
I tell you, I had to fight traffic to get here. I had to pass 2 or 3 Amish, a man with looked like a
load of pumpkins.
Load of pumpkins, pigs in his back.
I ran over a cow on the way here.
I did see a fox. I saw a fox on the side of the road on the way down here. But we got us a good topic. But first, thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing out the podcast. We've hit 500 likes on the big Facebook page, man.
Thank you for tolerating us.
you're
spending your time.
So what topic we got, though?
We're going to be doing one of the most, you talk about Kentucky, one of the most interesting places in the world, really, but we'll narrow it down to Kentucky, is Pleasant Hill. Shakertown at Pleasant Hill, Kentucky, in Mercer County, and the history of it, and some of their ideas, and what they stood for and thought about. And I don't know if our listeners have been to Pleasant Hill, but Pleasant Hill is a Shaker community, and the Shakers were a communal organization that developed during the Second Great Awakening. Second Great Awakening happened in the last part of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, about the time of the Revolutionary War. And we've talked about things connected with that, and the Shakers are connected, of course, with Kentucky history, with livestock, with technology, with all kinds of things. And they're a religious community. Yeah. They're a commune. They're a bunch of communists. Pleasant Hill, the particular Shaker community there, started in 1805 and lasted until about 1910. But it's just really interesting. It just shows you how history affects everything, and everything affects everything else. Basically, for our listeners, if you don't know much about the Shakers, or if you haven't been to Pleasant Hill, I mean, it's just an amazing place. It's now, a restored community that you can go and visit. You can eat there. You can spend the night, stay overnight. They have demonstrations there of, broom making and gardening aspects, agriculture. They have cattle. They have pigs. They have piggies that you can go see. They got sheep. It's pretty cool. It's a great place and very historical. And it kind of makes you think a little bit. It makes me think a whole lot, because Mother Ann Lee, our story really starts in England. And Mother Ann Lee was a Quaker. She was a type of Quaker that they called the shaking Quakers that got real excited. And she was, preaching, spreading the word. And of course, Shakers, like Quakers, are pacifist. They don't believe in war. Heaven forbid. What is wrong with you? You don't want to fight and kill people? You Christians out there? I mean, come on. So, the King of England and all these people, they lock them up. Lock them up, man. Lock them up. So while she's...
Village.
Yeah. So while she's laying around in prison, much like William Penn, another Quaker, she has this vision that God comes to her.
Yeah.
And tells her that, the way that people should live on earth. And so she kind of believes that the second coming of Christ is coming. He tells her that. And that she kind of believes that, Jesus was the first, messenger from God to the earth. And she kind of thought that she might be the second. So when she gets out, she says, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of England. So like a lot of people fleeing imprisonment, she came to America. She'd had a rough life, A lot of religious people today and every other time, they find out religion is really important because they've suffered on this earth. Believe it or not, there are actually some people out there suffering, and
they think something there's got to be something better.
There got to be something better. Seriously, I mean, we're kind of laughing about it, but it's true. She had 4 children, and she lost them all early, right after birth.
Wow.
She had a husband that was an alcoholic that probably beat her all the time.
That doesn't help any.
No, and then because of her faith, she was put in prison. So, she kind of had, a background of suffering. She was poor. She was real intelligent. And she, came to America, and she started this community of followers that, where she preached and said, the world's coming to an end, we're going to have heaven on earth. We need to get ready, boys. And so she started this religious community, the Shakers, they called them, the Shaking Quakers. And they held a lot of the tenets that, Quakers have. If you're familiar with Quakers, they're pacifist and believe in fighting and believe in equality. But one of the things that separated Mother Ann Lee apart, and this starts carrying up, you wonder, well, how's this connected to Pleasant Hill? Well, this was the faith that spread throughout northern and I guess we'll say Central America at the time. The furthest south community, Shaker community, was Union near Bowling Green, Kentucky. And Pleasant Hill was the next to the most southern. Most of them were in New England or in Ohio, places like that, Maine, New York, And, you talk about these religious communities. You can also talk about the Harmonites who were in Pennsylvania, Harmony, Pennsylvania, that were there for quite a while and had a religious community. My sister lives there, and they moved to New Harmony, Indiana, and they had similar tenements. But the Shakers were celibate, and celibate means they didn't sleep together. They were separate, men and women. And the reason she believed this was that she believed, and think about this for just a second, she believed that all people on the earth are your brothers and sisters, and they should be treated. If you're a woman, every woman is your sister, literally. And every male is your brother. And she said there was no reason to procreate, to have children, because, Jesus is coming to the earth, or we're going to be living in paradise earth. We don't need to anymore. And so she took families in, the Shakers took families in to their community, and the children were separated, and the men and the women lived in different houses, different wings of the village, and lived peacefully together. Everything was shared in common. It was a commune, If you have food, I have food, brother, and all this stuff. And they believed in diligence, working the best. And a lot of people will say, oh, the Shakers were like the Amish today. And that's so fallacious, because they were nothing like the Amish, only perhaps in simplicity. They believed in simplicity, because the Amish don't believe in technology. And the Shakers were heavy into technology. Heavy.
Bringing up the Shakers, I have a lot of questions, of course, naturally. And you talk about her coming from England. Where did she settle first off?
I think it was in New York.
New York. And then the other end of it is the Shakers. That's supposed to be a religious, is it the Holy Spirit is supposed to be in them?
Yes.
Yes. I guess, what's the
That's right, they get overcome. In the religious service, they sang and danced men on one side of the room and women on the other, and they kind of like square dancing almost. They faced each other and they sang religious songs, the Holy Spirit, and they would get so involved in it. I have been to the Shaker Meeting House over at Pleasant Hill, and there was a chorus group from Louisville that came to perform dressed in Shaker.
Oh, wow.
And I witnessed that. And I mean, I was trembling. I was so emotional. I was shaking. I'd have joined up if they had passed the pen around. I'd have lined up right with them, man, because I was overcome, Yeah. And this was all part of the Great Awakening, that they had like at Cane Ridge, Kentucky.
Yeah.
We talked about Cane Ridge and where the Christian Church Disciples of Christ started. Well, there on the frontier in America, there was a religious fervent desire for religion. There was a point where, okay, we've been attacked by Indians, Revolutionary War. What else there is? The lawlessness of the land. And people just became very spiritual. It was a unique time in America. We haven't seen it since. And we ain't seeing it today either. But they became very spiritual, very interested in religion. And, the two places for entertainment on the frontier were the courts, where they were like stringing people up, or it was in the churches, where they, camp meetings and so forth. And when they had these religious meetings in Kentucky, we're not talking about just a group of people coming. We talked about John Fee, so we're not talking about, a group of people coming. We're talking about thousands of frontiers driving in horses and wagons and so forth, and meeting and having these ministers give speeches that just people, just follow. They wanted it. They were excited day and night, and they flipped and flopped on the ground and yelled amen, and they were just overcome with emotion. And it was this religious fervent that really helped develop Pleasant Hill because people were very interested. And so in 1805, there were 3 brothers, I think, that traveled to Kentucky, mostly on foot, which is over 1,000 miles, to look for converts to join Pleasant Hill. And they were very excited. Let me just tell you a little bit about what they came and they told people. First of all, they said that according to Mother Ann Lee and what they believed, that people are equal.
Yeah.
I mean, heck,
what idea.
This is back in 1805. That men and women are equal. That blacks and whites are equal.
Wow.
That, rich and poor, that no one's separated in the eyes of God, and oh my goodness.
Ruffle some feathers.
Yes. She taught, Mother Ann Lee taught, and this is kind of interesting, that God was a dual personage, male and female. Wow. That God was both male and female. And that, many of our kind of Christian folks today, they think of God and the male as dominant and everything, how silly, that instead of the masculine-oriented traditional belief in an all-male trinity, she interpreted the passage in Genesis that stated, and I quote, "So God created man in his own image. And in the image of God created he him. Male and, guess what, female. Created he them." To mean that both sexes were in God's image, therefore God was both male and female.
Wow.
And that, she acknowledged that Jesus was the first coming of the Messiah, but believed the second coming had already occurred with herself.
Wow.
So she said, here I am, man. So Ann Lee based on her, her religion on this vision. And, I know it sounds a little crazy, but first of all, if you were a Shaker, you had to work your butt off.
Yeah.
I mean, you were perfecting not only your spiritual relationship with your brothers and sisters, but with you, with the earth, with everything. I mean, you took care of everything. You were, a custodian, so to speak, of all living things.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was pretty heavy. And so when they did something, they didn't just do it, half butt. They went and did things really well. Among that, in their technology, they did all kinds of things. One thing is they had the first indoor water system, utility system in America, I believe, at least in the Eastern America, certainly in Kentucky.
Yeah.
They had a water tower of sorts that funneled water into all the buildings where most women, at that time, I say women, they did most of the cooking, the work, and the washing. They had to take a bucket of water and go out to the creek.
Yeah.
But these had water in their kitchens.
Wow. Wow.
With a pump, they could turn on and off, indoor plumbing. This is like 1810. If you've ever been to Pleasant Hill, one of the things that strikes you are the stone buildings that are just, everything
masonry
they do. Right, masonry. Their furniture, their architecture, everything is very simple, very plain, just like their lives. They didn't believe in, hey, man, look at this coat I got on, and I'm striped in yellow and red, and look at me. It's like everyone should, maybe wear dark colors, or everyone should be simple, this, that, and the other. But their technology in their buildings was just incredible, and you'll just it's just a most incredible place. The structure. There were hundreds of buildings at one time, and they were designed by a young boy, 12 years old, Micaiah Burnett.
Wow!
And he designed these buildings. He was a genius. He was an architect.
Yeah.
And he was 12 years old, and he designed all the buildings. So when you go to Pleasant Hill today and you see this incredible, I'll call it a campus of brick and stone buildings, the Center Family House, for instance, or the East Family, West Family, all these places were just incredible. 12-year-old designed them all and built them. And they cut the stone from the Palisades along the Kentucky River, the Upper Palisades.
Oh, wow.
They cut the stone there and moved it there, so it's all hand-cut stone. And they accepted, into their village, believe it or not, black people.
Wow.
You could be equal. You could be equal. If there was free blacks, come on in, man. It didn't matter. Most of the people were poor, but when they were there, they worked. Yeah. And everything they did was to perfection.
Well, you bring them up and all the stuff that they kind of did as perfection, but it reminds me, or connects to me, Native Americans in a way of being one with the nature, taking care of everything, and I guess that's my connection there.
I guess I'm not sure the American Indians. I'm going to throw off on.
Well, as far as like battling, obviously,
right. I don't think there's been any. Let me just make this statement for what it's worth, and people go, "Oh, I'm here on the podcast right now." I don't think there's been any culture in American history that has performed as the way the Shakers did, especially at Pleasant Hill.
Wow.
I don't think there's been any society of any race, of any group of people that have ever done as much as they did.
Wow.
And let me give you an example of some of the things that they did, because everything they did was done to perfection. And their Shakertown, if you don't know where it is, I guess it's about 20 miles south west of Lexington and maybe 12 miles east of Harrodsburg on Highway 68, what is today, above the Kentucky River. And they grew a lot of broom corn, as all Shaker communities did, and made brooms. And their brooms were of such high quality, and of their agriculture products were of such magnitude that they could sell them for a third more than what was commonly being sold at that time. Yeah. People wanted them so much.
Because they were doing so well.
They were doing so well. And people came to buy and produce and things, furniture that they made and everything else. And, they were always saying they're so kind, so honest to deal with. People like dealing with them. And there's a whole lot of things. Let me just talk a little bit about some of the things that the community was known for. We talked about livestock. Well, they joined up with Henry Clay. They developed this breed of cattle, the Milk and Shorthorn. Yeah. I think we talked about in one of our other podcasts where, they were thinking like, well, why have beef cows and why have dairy cows? Why don't we have one cow that can do both? And so they brought a bull with Henry Clay. He put in some of the money, and they put in the money, and they bought a bull in Europe, a Shorthorn bull, and brought it to Pleasant Hill to breed their cattle. Wow. They were ahead of times agriculturally. They used selective breeding, both in plants and in animals, hogs, sheep, and which was hardly done by anybody back then. Scientific agriculture well before the average farmer did. And they raised Saxony sheep for wool, which Shaker sisters spun and wove into cloth and for home use that they sold also. John Bryant sold one pair of Berkshire hogs for $500 from Pleasant Hill in 1838. And that was when a hog was bringing maybe $4 or $5 a piece. And he sold a pair of them for $500.
$500. Wow. I mean, what year was that again?
1838.
Wow. That sounds like...
Yeah. I mean, that just gives you... There's good hogs back in, man. Well, they were breeding hogs.
Yeah.
You know, and they wanted to improve their line of breeding. People recognize that. So there were people that came down the river, Ohio River, and through Cumberland Gap that were coming into this region and beginning to farm. The golden years of agriculture were blooming, we might say. And, you know, they wanted cattle to take west, and the Shakers provided that. Let me just say some of the other things that the Shakers did. I mean, it could go on. We don't have enough time in this podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, they wanted to develop a silk industry, and they studied the Chinese silk industry, and they're made from the silkworms, which feed only on mulberries.
Yeah.
So if you go to Pleasant Hill today, on the east end of the village, you'll see rows of mulberry trees, big mulberry trees that they planted, and they developed a silk industry.
Wow.
I mean, that's how technical. They had a railroad, a primitive railroad that went out into the fields where they put grain and hay to feed their cattle. And they pushed the rail cars out. Yeah. I mean, they were just, technology was just
booming. I mean, ahead of their game.
And it was just everything, you know, well pumps in their kitchen, the upper floors. They had moving grain elevators and mechanical corn shellers that nobody else had during that time. I mean, it was just incredible what they would do. And they were working for the Lord. This was all based on spirituality. Well, here's the thing they started doing too. They weren't just like sitting back on their haunches like so many Christians are today. They didn't believe in slavery. Yeah. They were peaceful.
Well, yeah,
so the Civil War started to break.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the 1830s and 40s, and even before that, the 20s, when they had a surplus of money, you know what they oftentimes did with it?
What's that?
They went out and bought slaves.
Oh, wow.
And then set them free.
Wow.
Yeah. And they could, you know, it was their will. If they wanted to become Shakers, they could, but they did that. Yeah. Well, you know, there's a bunch of rednecks in Mercer County. Let me tell you, whole bunches of them.
Unless you're listening from Mercer.
Unless you're listening, you're all great. But in about 1830, they started rioting. They said they didn't like the Shakers competing, buying their slaves and setting them free, that was a bad press. So they went out on a riot, these rednecks did, and they burned a bunch of buildings at Shaker. No one ever talks about that. This is like you heard it here first. They burned a whole bunch of barns and buildings and things down and really damaged the community just in a riot. They just attacked them. And, of course, the Shakers didn't defend them, so they just let them burn, you know.
Wow.
And they did it out of just hatred because they were angry because they recognized black people as being equal.
And they were taking away their slaves.
You know, you could probably compare that with John Fee and Berea, what was going on at the time. How they threatened to kill him, too. You know, these same old boys. You know, the Proud Boys. You know what they call them? Isn't that what they call them? Trump calls them? The Proud Boys? You know, stand by, boys. They were alive and well in the 1830s. Then their little tight shorts. Big chest, you know, long hair, armed, you know. So they
taking away the income, man.
Taking away the income, man. But I didn't mention, you know, I said they were strategically located.
Yeah.
They used the Kentucky River, and they had so much stuff that they had orchards, and I mean, it just sounds honey, you know, they had it all, man. And they used the Kentucky River, the Shaker landing on the Kentucky River, and they floated in flatboats down to New Orleans, just like we talked about, selling their wares and merchandise, their hams, country ham, and their jams and jellies, and their seeds. They were known for their seeds, you know, not only breeds of livestock, but all kinds of vegetable garden seeds. They sold them in bulk, you know, and supplied America with that, and people going west. I read that in 1 year, and I'm pretty sure of this, that the Shakers sold something like 10 tons.
Wow.
That's 10 times 2, 20,000 pounds of jelly.
Whoa.
That they had canned to people in the outside.
In a year?
In a year.
Wow.
1 year.
Wow.
1 year. And that shows you what production. There were at one time, there were about 500 people at Pleasant Hill.
Okay, that was the question I was going to how many acres do you think it was?
Oh, gosh, there were a lot. I mean, there were a lot of acreage. They started out, I think, with like 120. A fellow donated his farm to them and joined them. And by the time it was over, I think they had like 4,200 acres that they had bought and expanded.
I'd say to produce that much, you'd have to have loads of acres.
They did. And everybody was working their butts off. Nobody was sitting under the shade tree. That was part of it. In the Center family house, I understand there were 100 men that lived in that one building.
Yeah. When you say the Center family house,
the Center, Center, that's the big stone building in the middle of the village.
Okay.
They had like the West family, the Center family, the East family. They had all kinds of different structures there that families lived in. They even had outline structures outside their farm that they maintained, and people that were thinking about becoming Shakers could go live in those areas. You know, they might live with their wife, and children, and then maybe help and work on the farm. But one of the things that started leading to the decline of the Shaker Club, that's the next question, after this huge rise in success, was the Civil War. There became a bunch of freeloaders that came in, first of all, that joined the community. This aid added to it. That would come particularly in wintertime because they were hungry and cold and didn't have anything. And so they got all the food and everything that the Shakers had worked their butts off, you know. And,
all summer.
And then in spring would come, and, I think I'll change my mind. It's time to go.
Tired of the shaking.
Tired of the shaking, you know. And so that really pulled up. But the North and the South, you know, they didn't take sides. But both, especially in 1860.
And right in Mercer County.
Oh, Battle of Perryville.
Yeah.
Oh, the North went through, we're talking, you know, maybe 30, 40,000 men.
Yeah.
And they fed them and cared for them from both sides as they came through. And it bankrupted them. They never recovered after the Civil War. They never recovered. Yeah. And the village, eventually, the last ones there, in 1910, they gave up their land to be taken care of or something and sold it off on a contract.
The tolls of war there.
Tolls of war were really rough on them, but it was because of their good nature. Because they, you know, they're not going to turn away people who are hungry or medical supplies. They were famous for medical supplies. I mean, they gave it all to them. You know, they demanded it as they rode through and camped there. Yeah. Both armies, and just stripped them. You know, so isn't that odd if you think about it a minute? You know, people that don't believe in war and killing, and believe in everyone's your brother and sister, taking care of them, and yet these maggots, you know, these Union and Southern maggots, these war suck you dry, man.
And that's what people would be the argument of, like, you know, you can't be passive because eventually somebody's going to take advantage of you completely. Yeah, and they're through their good nature, just caring for all humans. Yes, you know, we'll give you the bread on our table. Isn't that wild? It's not right though. No, it's not right. No. And they didn't even believe in war. You know, there's these morons. You know these. You know, line up and shoot them, boys.
I'll line up and shoot them, boys. You know, I'm going to kill you in the name of Christ, you know. It's God's will, you know, all that bullshit. Evangelical bullshit.
Who found, so you were talking about the main lady that founded
Mother Ann Lee.
Mother Ann Lee, yeah. Who was the founder of the ones in Pleasant Hill, or was it the same?
They all worked for it. Yeah. There were some men, 3 men that left New York, and I can research and maybe, you know, find their name. They came there in 1805. January the 1st, they left New York and walked on foot all the way.
And set up in Old Kentucky.
Yeah, when they asked for converts, you know, and people. The 3 Shaker missionaries, they call themselves missionaries, were John Meacham, Benjamin Seth Youngs, and Isaac Bates. And they sent out to find new converts. And like I said, in January the 1st, you know, and they were pouring into Kentucky at that time, Cumberland Gap and the Ohio River.
But that does set up from the time of, say, like, you know, the early parts of the state, you know, about 10 years. You know, 10, 13, 14.
They believed they were living in the last millennium. And all people shared this brother and sister relationship. And, you know, it was, but, you know, you go in the buildings at Pleasant Hill today, and the spiral staircase, you know, in the trustee's office is just unbelievable. I mean, it just spins. Have you ever been there by any chance?
I've never been there. And it sounds like
my former wife worked there for 20-something years, so I was associated on a daily basis.
Wow,
Not that I know anything more than anybody. There's a lot of Shaker people that are just experts, you know, as there is in all parts of history. I humble myself to say, I know where it is.
It's somewhere. It's over that highway.
That's about all I shadow in their expertise, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just don't
Well,
know.
and one, I guess you'd call it a misconception, but a lot of people, that the reason the Shakers died out is because they didn't reproduce. But is that
They depended on converts. So a lot of people say, well, they're going to die out because they don't reproduce.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't, but they took in more. But during the times after the Civil War, there were fewer people who wanted to join because the cultural changes, the social environment of America, and the cultural changes in the decades before and after the war made Shaker life less appealing to people. And so they, if you don't get convinced and if you don't have children, when a child lived in the village and they grew up and they became mature, whatever that is, 14, 15, 16 years old, they gave them, with no pressure, you can stay with us or you can leave and go out into the world.
Yeah.
And they many of them went to the world, many of them stayed, but it was their choice. They didn't say, "Oh, you're one of us," even though they were babies and they were raised, in that environment. They chose what path they were going to do, and the Shakers didn't pressure them at all. They said, "Man, it's your world, squirrel. It's whatever you want to do."
If they came back, they'd be like, "All right, you're
right, you be one of us." But they knew what it was about, but they wait till they were mature to make that decision. So the Shaker community was dissolved in 1910.
Is that everywhere? Pretty much all of them were?
Pretty much. The one in Pleasant Hill was, Mary Settles was the last Shaker, I believe, that was there. But they believed in equal rights, and they lived in a communal society that was just absolutely beautiful. Shaker furniture today, I've been privileged to have a few pieces of it and sell it in my antique business. And it is just exquisite, and people just, pay huge prices for it. And it's highly recognizable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's books on Shaker furniture and all this kind of stuff. But
outside of Pleasant Hill, is there any other places in Kentucky that are...
South Union.
South Union?
Was down around Bowling Green.
Okay.
And it was another Shaker community. It was the one furthest south in the United States. And it was more ravaged in the Civil War than Pleasant Hill was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Down around Bowling Green. Southern boys.
Got hold
Bad
of it.
boys.
What about, and then, is there a place in Ohio?
Oh yeah. Lebanon, Ohio. There's several. And then Sabbath Day Lake, Maine.
Pennsylvania.
There's all kinds of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 35, let's say. Don't quote me on that, but that's a general nature.
Yeah.
And they're all done the same way. I mean, they're all just, the buildings are exquisite and hand done.
I mean, even a piece of furniture, if it was made
by the Shakers,
1900s, it's 100 plus years old.
Oh, I know.
Still
it's just
in good
beautiful,
condition.
just beautiful wood and design, and very functional. It's just many of them were not marked. They didn't believe in saying, "Well, I did this. I put my name on it." John Henry on the back of that didn't happen. And occasionally, there's some pieces that were stamped by the village name. Yeah.
So how would you know how can you?
You have to know. You have to know the furniture. You have to be able to see it. If I gave you a book, you'd see it. But it's just really beautiful. And so, the chairs were oftentimes ladder back chairs, and they had a little acorn usually on the top of the chair on each pole that went up, I actually recently bought a Shaker hoop rocker for women, and the handles, the hands of the rocker only go halfway so that a hoop skirt could fit on the other. I mean, they thought of everything. They even made stoves. They made stoves. Shaker stoves are real petite and kind of like a Ben Franklin stove, that type of thing. He started the stoves, Franklin did. They modified and made things even better. They were always looking to make something better. Everything they did, whether it was animal or buildings or the function of their farms. I mean, they just sat around at night, and that's all. How can we make life better? How can we become ready for Christ, to whoever to come to the earth, for paradise earth?
Yeah.
It's like, what are we doing here, boys? Well, we're making paradise earth. Can you imagine walking up up dusty road, and seeing a bunch of Shakers out in the field cutting wheat or something? What y'all doing? Paradise earth, man. Come join us, brother.
Yeah.
We got food on the table and hot bread.
Work in the morning.
Country ham, work in the morning. Victuals, all you can eat, and good company, and everybody loving each other. Man. I mean, everyone's a brother and sister. And just,
So if you was to go to...
And women equality. See, this is equality.
It's different, man.
Let's burn the place down. Women are equal. Women have rights here.
Well,
1805.
You bring that up, and You talk about Mother, what's her name again?
Ann Lee.
Mother Ann Lee. And, oftentimes, you don't find a religious movement or any of the sort by a woman at all.
No.
That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Any others, you got, what's the Utah people out there?
Mormons,
as a man.
Yeah. Do you ever think that with what I've told you about Mother Ann Lee, that maybe one of the reasons that she was looking for Paradise Earth was her background, that she had such a rough early life of losing children, and her husband is an alcoholic and just horrid, thrown in prison in her own slop.
So she didn't have any children living.
No, when she had none.
I mean, goodness sakes, I
she didn't have a husband either.
I mean, she might be okay with that part, but
but,
I couldn't imagine having four kids and all.
Marriage was a little rough for her at the time. But, I hate to talk about that and take that away from her spiritual, because she based it on the Bible. I mean, these are Christians.
Yeah, and she was
and isn't that funny?
She was seeking.
How can that be? How can Christians be peaceful? How can they be not killing other people and not believe in it? Be pacifists. I mean, how can Christians do that?
I mean, it seems like there was.
We got the whole gamut of them, right? We got those that say kill. Let's have war. Let's build up our nuclear
like there was a fella
force
who kind of based the whole religion on that.
I know. I mean, really.
Yeah. Well,
how can there be such difference? And then these other guys that are these soldiers claiming to be Christians that have pocket Bibles in their pockets that are marching through, gobbling up all their food and taking their medicines and putting people down and running people through a few miles away with bayonets and cutting their throats with Bowie knives and
for God and country.
Cannons. Yeah, for God and country, for God. And then they're starving to death and wounded, and these peaceful people are taking care of them and feeding them and going broke doing it.
Yep.
I mean, what kind of... You think about it. Just step back heavy, and look at this. It is heavy. It's heavy, man.
On the other end, you got these other soldiers who are fighting on the basis
in God's name.
Keeping other people in prison and enslaved.
Right. That's right.
It's heavy, man.
And in the name of God, we're fighting. I mean, they had preachers at night that sat around their camps and spoke the word to them.
And the Shakers there, right in the middle of it.
And the Shakers right in the middle of it. Yeah. And then one group destroying the other through hate and killing.
Yeah.
This is our world, man. This is life. Man. Heavy, man.
Good thing this was in 1860. We've all let that go.
Yeah, we've all let that go. We don't have to worry about that no more.
We've matured.
We've matured into the nuclear age. We can push a button and kill all life on Earth, in the name of God. Oh man, think about that. That's what's so beautiful about these podcasts, I mean, they're not only about history, but they make you think, make you laugh or make you cry.
Love thy neighbor.
Yeah, love thy neighbor. Can you believe that? What does that mean to people today? Where are they? Are they so close to it they can't see it?
I think
Tell me, James.
I think that's what it is, man. You're blinded by what's right in front of you.
Right.
And you can't see the big picture.
You can't really. No. You just react.
Yeah, reaction
and
culture.
You don't think
people who talk about cancel culture or whatever, it's reaction culture.
We're in a school. We're in your classroom right now doing this podcast, and I would hope that schools, and I don't mean to be radical, would teach children to think.
We try.
Really, and create a society of thinking people. And I understand that there's certain people today talking about history. They want to rewrite history and have it programmed like they do in North Korea and China, where history is only given they didn't do that.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. These soldiers are all good. They were good, especially the Southern ones. They imprisoned people. That's God's will. They want you to teach that we didn't make any mistakes as a country historically or as people individually.
Yeah.
Brainwash them.
Well, if you
create robots.
If you want reality, we all make mistakes.
Yes.
And so has the country and every aspect of society has made mistakes.
It's interesting to me when I taught social studies in school, and I really loved having discussions, just like we're having, only not so deep or heavy, but still pretty heavy. And I would really try to stay in the middle as much as I could, and just ask kids to, what do you think about that? Do you think it's a bad idea that we should all take care of each other? I'd ask kids that question. Yep. Little Johnny back there from the farm. I do.
I don't want to take care of you.
I can't. I went out of here right now. I hate this dang place. I heard that so many times, and I would stay calm. Well, is there anyone that agrees with Johnny? Yeah. You know, if he's the quarterback on the football team, everybody in the whole room would raise their hands. You know,
you've told me this story before, but I'll share it.
Oh no, I don't even know what you're going to say, but Lord have mercy.
You once had a student, a disruptive student, tend to be talkative and distract. Not that they didn't participate in class more and a smart, intelligent student, but they tend to talk and maybe distract others. And you finally said, Jimmy, and that's not the real name, but Jimmy, I'm gonna have to move you again.
Yeah, for the 10th time, because you're taking out everyone when you're into the room. I've done that 1,000 times.
Oh, little Johnny raised his hand. Mr. Pope, you can set him right by me. I hate him.
Yeah, I remember that. I do. I'd forgotten totally about that. Oh, gosh. There's so many things that are blessings from teaching. And that guy raised his hand. He said, you can sit him right next to me because I won't talk to him because I hate him. That's right. He told me that. And it was just as serious. I hate his guts. He just... And it's like, here we are having a Christian community at Crab Orchard, That's a true story. Yeah, that happened. Yeah. So many like that. That's what's so marvelous about teaching. I mean, you run into that nearly every day if your eyes are open of the week. I love it. I mean, I tell you what, I look back on my life as being an elementary teacher, and I just kind of stumbled into it because I had a best friend that was doing it, and I thought, man, you get all the holidays off, I was working as a journalist at the time, and holidays I had to cover. Oh, go cover the city council, go do this, go that, go to the fire board, whatever. And he was like Easter and Christmas and summer vacations, and I had a family too, And I thought, man, what a great job, and working with children, And I went into it just kind of blind like that, just because of jealousy of a friend. I was jealous of him, And man, it was the best decision I ever made in my life. I mean, I was just, I was cooked for it. I mean, I just loved it. I ate up every aspect of it. Not only the time off when I wasn't working, don't get me wrong, but when I was there, after I settled down and, calmed down a little bit. I stayed calm. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. Well,
I knew a teacher one time, staying calm. I'm looking up at your ceiling right now, these asbestos ceilings. And I knew a teacher one time who was young. It was her first year of teaching. I taught with her, and I'm not going to say where it is. Yeah. But it might have been Crab Orchard, but she had in the ceiling, she'd take a broom and push it up and stand on a desk, and she had a bottle of vodka. And she would drink that vodka. She'd invite me over. This is before school. And I think they finally fired her. She was a wild one, man. She was wilder than a buck.
I would hope a bit.
Yeah. It went on for a good year. Kept me strong in the classroom. Kept me smiling.
Just teaching their brains out.
Teaching my brains out. Absolutely. Well, probably with that, we better not. We're better being too honest. We're being too shaker-like, too open, too brotherly. Yeah, but better go back to the real world, and I'll try to leave here and hate people and try to run over people on the side of the road. And yell and cuss poor people, black people, and be a racist, and put down women, and beat them up,
That's the
be the American way,
That's the trials, I guess, of society now. You get so much right instantly, and that's the thing,
What do you mean you get? We get what? What are you talking about?
Society. You get society so instantly.
Where?
Oh,
just leave in this building, or in this building. I'm confused.
Yeah.
Just out in the world.
On your phone.
On your phone.
Okay.
Yeah, you do. You can get anything you want.
Everybody talks about it's reaction culture. You want to react to everything.
Yeah. Certainly not thinking.
Instead of taking a breath, I need to post that. But anyway.
Yeah, it is. That's true. And a lot of people, I know some friends of mine are kind of giving it a rest right now.
That's a good. It's a great idea, honestly.
I've been charging into it. I've been pissing people off.
Well, I'm going in
full throttle. I almost feel like it's divine right or something to. By God, it's my right to tell you what I'm thinking. Nobody cares. I don't like it.
I'll burn it down.
Burn it down. Go burn some barns down.
Easy. Take the shaker approach.
Yes, that's true. It's so true. I mean, we're laughing, man, but it's paradise on earth. What are we going to have? Hell on earth or paradise? One or the other. Take your pick. Most people are picking hell.
Yeah,
they are. The masses. Fan the flames, man. Fan the flames. 99.9%. Fanning those flames, brother. I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel safe leaving this building.
Are you ready to drive home?
I ain't ready to drive home. I'm going to lock my doors.
All right. I think we're good.
All right.
All right. All right. Well, if you want to connect to us and tell us what you think.
Yeah, tell us what you think. We'd love to hear what you think.
Hit us up on
hit us up
Twitter
on,
or Facebook.
Don't be too hard.
At KY History Pod. So,
Yes.
that being said, we'll see you next time.
Adios.